Kasey Kahne waited nearly 3 decades for one moment, and somehow it happened when almost nobody expected it. Not in NASCAR, not in a Hendrick car, not even with his own team. It happened at Williams Grove Speedway, where one of the most respected veterans in American motorsports finally erased the biggest missing piece of his career. And while the dirt racing world celebrated Kasey Kahne's emotional breakthrough, another Hendrick superstar was suddenly forced into an uncomfortable spotlight. Because Kyle Larson, the defending NASCAR Cup champion, is now answering questions nobody thought he'd be facing in 2026. Why can't he win? Kasey Kahne's story Friday night was straight out of a racing movie. After 227 World of Outlaws starts spread across 29 years, Kahne finally captured his first career World of Outlaws feature victory at Williams Grove Speedway in Pennsylvania. That's a stat that honestly sounds impossible when you remember who Kasey Kahne is. This is an 18-time NASCAR Cup Series winner, a guy who won the Coca-Cola 603 different times, a former Hendrick Motorsports star, a driver who succeeded with 4 different manufacturers across NASCAR's National Series, and yet despite all of that success, the World of Outlaws victory always escaped him. Until now. The craziest part, Kahne wasn't even supposed to be in that car. Macri Motorsports called him in as a replacement after Anthony Macri was sidelined with an injury. Kahne stepped into the ride, immediately looked competitive, and then survived a brutal late race battle with Sheldon Haudenschild to finally grab the checkered flag, door to door, right against the wall. Classic Williams Grove chaos. And when the race ended, the reaction across the dirt racing community felt bigger than just another sprint car win, because this wasn't about stats anymore. This was about persistence. There's a bit of veteran racer refusing to let one unfinished chapter define his legacy. That's why Kyle Larson's reaction mattered. Larson wasn't just congratulating another driver, he understood exactly how difficult this achievement really was. Larson said he'd landed from a flight just in time to watch Kahne's interview, and what stood out to him was the emotion from everybody involved, the fans, the crew, the entire atmosphere around the moment. And honestly, Larson's comments revealed something deeper about how racers view Kahne, not just as a former NASCAR star, but as someone who genuinely invested in sprint car racing long after many Cup drivers moved on. Kasey Kahne Racing became one of the most respected operations in dirt racing history. Multiple championships, elite level talent, years of dominance. But even with all that success as an owner, Kahne still had this one personal mountain he hadn't climbed himself. That's why Friday night hit differently, and there's another layer here people shouldn't ignore. This victory also exposed something fascinating about racing psychology. Sometimes the pressure disappears the moment expectations disappear. Kahne stepped into that car with almost no long-term pressure attached. He wasn't building a championship run. He wasn't protecting points. He wasn't carrying weekly expectations. He just drove free. And sometimes veteran drivers become the most dangerous version of themselves when they stop chasing legacy and simply trust experience. That's exactly what this looked like. Now compare that to Kyle Larson's current situation in NASCAR. Completely opposite reality. Larson is still one of the fastest drivers in the world. Nobody seriously questions his raw talent. But the numbers are becoming impossible to ignore. The defending Cup Series champion has now gone more than 29 races without a victory. For most drivers, that wouldn't sound catastrophic. For Kyle Larson, it absolutely does, because this era of NASCAR rewards winning aggressively. The playoff structure is built around stacking victories, collecting playoff points, and peaking at the right time. And right now, Larson's title defense feels unstable. Not terrible, not broken, but vulnerable. Larson himself pushed back against the panic this week at Watkins Glen International. He basically said the media and fans care more about the streak than he does. And in fairness, he's probably right. Drivers don't usually obsess over streaks the way fans do. They focus on speed, execution, and whether the car is capable of winning. But Larson also admitted something important. At times, he says the team feels close to a breakthrough. At other times, they feel nowhere near it. That inconsistency is the real concern, not the streak itself. Championship teams can survive bad luck. They can survive one off week. What they struggle to survive is unpredictability. And right now, Larson's team feels unpredictable. Some weekends they unload with race-winning pace. Other weekends they disappear completely. That's dangerous in modern NASCAR because momentum matters more now than ever, especially psychologically. Once drivers start hearing non-stop questions about when will you finally win again, the pressure changes. Crew chiefs tighten strategy calls. Drivers start forcing moves. Teams chase speed instead of balance. And suddenly a small slump becomes a real problem. Now, does that mean Larson is in trouble long term? Absolutely not. In fact, Watkins Glen could be exactly the place where this entire conversation flips overnight. Road courses fit Larson's skill set perfectly. He's aggressive under braking, elite at adapting to changing grit conditions, and fearless in chaotic restarts. If there's a track where he can suddenly remind everyone who he is, this might be it. But if the drought continues, that's when the noise gets louder, because fans already see the contrast developing. On one side, you have Kasey Kahne, a veteran finally completing an emotional underdog story after 29 years. On the other, you have Kyle Larson, arguably the most talented driver in NASCAR, still searching for answers despite driving championship-level equipment. And motorsports fans love contrasts like that, especially emotionally. Some fans will look at Kahne's victory and feel inspired. Others will immediately start questioning why Larson can't seem to close races anymore. That's how quickly narratives shift in sports. One emotional victory can unintentionally put pressure on somebody else. Best case scenario, Larson wins soon, the conversation disappears instantly, and Hendrick Motorsports stabilizes heading into the playoff push. Worst case scenario, the drought keeps growing, confidence starts slipping internally, and suddenly every race weekend becomes dominated by questions instead of results. And NASCAR history shows that pressure can snowball fast, but Friday night ultimately belonged to Kasey Kahne, a driver who spent nearly 30 years chasing one specific moment and finally found it when the racing world least expected it. Question now is whether that same breakthrough energy is about to hit Kyle Larson next, or whether this winless streak is becoming something much bigger than Hendrick Motorsports wants to admit. So what do you think? Does Kyle Larson break the drought at Watkins Glen, or is this starting to become a real problem for the defending champion? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoy sharp NASCAR analysis like this, make sure to subscribe to SportsWire USA for more coverage all season long.